Hi everybody and welcome to CAD-Prof.com. This is lesson 3 of a 10-part series for landscape design. Along with each of the lessons you would have also received a PDF file. I'm going to open that right now. I do suggest that you download all the files as soon as you purchase the lesson, and as I work through the program I'll be placing them on my desktop just for ease of access. This particular lesson, let me rotate it into the right direction. We're going to be talking about line types, and within line types I have a number of items I'd like you to jot down. Now you can easily have this just on the second screen so you can review it. It is in a printable state, so you can definitely print the images that I've downloaded, and we'll be referring to the information that's on this page. We'll be also working with the capstone project, so I've removed all the erroneous information and simply left the basic dimensions that we're going to be working with in this particular project. Alright, I'll close that down and I'll open AutoCAD. And as it's booting up, we will be doing a very short review. Last lesson we basically talked about drawing the first stages of this particular project. That particular drawing we did not save. We don't need to save it. If you did, that's fine. But we're going to be starting a brand new project with this particular drawing. But first, we're going to work with layers. So we're going to be starting a brand new CAD drawing, the one that we typically do. Let me just lower the screen to make it full size. There we go. And I will go up to the File menu. Again, whether you use File or the large A, doesn't matter. Select File, New, and we use the acad.dwt template file. So let's open that up. If your screen doesn't already reveal the secondary text menu, just click on the arrow that points down, and then near the bottom of that menu, click on Show Menu Bar. Mine says Hide once again because it's already viewed on my screen. Now let's go through the setup parameters once again. We're going to use architectural units. So right at this point, just simply type in units, and you should see it actually appear on your screen. It also automatically shows any other similar types of commands, but we've got it correct, so we'll just press Enter. We're going to be working with architectural units from here on in throughout the projects, but this is a good practice to get into. As a review, precision refers to how it's going to be displayed when we dimension. So if I actually dimension something and it's to a 1/16 of an inch, it will show it. If it is to a 32nd or 64th, it will round the number off visually, but actually calculates it to that unit measurement. So we'll leave it at a 1/16 of an inch. It really won't make that much difference at this point. The other pieces of information as we work through the program is how we work with other drawings that may have been drawn in a separate file and how we insert them. What's nice here, it's also showing us how we can type in the unit measurements, and once again we'll explore that as we go through the program. So select OK. Let's set our limits for this test drawing. They're going to be the same, 12 units along the x-axis, 9 units along the y. So type in the word limits, and again this is just simply practice. We're going to be repeating ourselves several times just so that we get a good handle on it. The lower left corner is always 0, 0. That never changes. We'll select Enter, and the upper right hand corner, it's already identified it as a 12,9, x first, then y. So this is a landscape. If I wanted to change it to a portrait view, it would be 9,1'0" or 9,12, and I'd change the orientation of the paper. So let's press Enter. Great. Let's take a look at our screen and show the outer limits of our grid. So down at the snap functions, we're going to click on the snap settings. These drawing aids do have different functions associated with it, and we'll slowly work through that as we're working through the program. I'm going to leave everything at a 1/2 inch. The only thing I'm going to change here is the adaptive grid and the display grid beyond limits. Now we've seen this menu a couple times. It shares the snap on function F9. Now occasionally we use this just to very quickly draw out a symmetrical grid, But we typically don't, only because it limits our position where we can actually draw our lines to half-inch intervals. And if your mouse ever jumps on your screen or jumps around on your screen, it's because this function has been accidentally set on. So that's an F9 key to turn it on or off. It's a toggle. Select OK. There's our grid. We're going to make that full screen, so we simply type in Z enter, A enter, and it fills our screen. So from here we're going to take a look at the layers menu. And the menu itself, there's a number of different, obviously, parts and pieces to it. But for now, just click on where it says Layers Property. It's the largest icon in that section. And everything within this menu defines and allows you to interact with the layer. I've opened mine up. I've basically stretched out each of these menus so that you can actually see what they do, and we'll be talking about them. There's also a series of icons at the top. And these icons allow us to create new layers within viewports, or what we can do is actually delete layers and make layers current. So the first icon in this menu is the new layer icon. Now we don't have to take any extra steps. Just follow along what I'm doing. I'm going to walk you through every particular step. I'm going to click on the new layer icon. I'm not clicking on anything else. Notice how the word layer 1 is already highlighted. It's waiting for your input immediately to what we're going to call it. Today we're going to draw several different geometric objects in their respective layers. So this one we'll call triangle. And I haven't used uppercase or lowercase. I simply typed it in. You can type in whatever you want in this exercise. We're using the word to represent what we're going to be drawing in that particular layer. So there's several different functions that we're going to look at here. We can turn a layer on or off so it's visually seen on our screen. We can also freeze or thaw a layer, but we'll look at that a bit later on. We can lock a layer so that you can't edit it or modify it. Therefore, it protects it in case we accidentally select and try to delete something that we're not supposed to. We can lock it, and in this case, even though it's visible on your screen, you can't select it using the selection sets. We can add colors to layer, and those are just visual cues as to what layer you're drawing in. There's different types of line types that come with CAD that allow us to draw continuous lines, hidden lines, and so on. And then line weight, we typically leave this one alone for this particular program. Transparency, how it's actually seen on your screen, whether it's semi-transparent or not. Plot is the one that I find that students quite often accidentally select. And then when they actually go to plot a file, they can see it on their screen. Everything looks great. They go to print it out, and that layer is missing each time. And what happens is they've simply accidentally selected the do not plot. So when I click on it, I get a little red circle with a line through it, which simply means you can see it, but it won't plot that particular layer. And that might be good if you have construction lines or layers or notes that you don't want to have plotted. So I'm going to click that off just to make sure that what we have is plottable. And so the first thing we're going to do in the triangle layer is change the color. So I'm not going to click on the word white. I'm going to click on the color chip. Now, if I have a black screen or a shaded screen, this will say white. If I have a perfect white background, this will say black, and the two are interchangeable. So it says white, although it's going to print out black. So I'm going to click on the chip, and these are my color selections. Now there's 256 different colors that are in the general palette. These are the primary colors we're going to be using. The colors are also numbered 1, 2, 3, all the way to 9 in this particular menu, and then there's different shades of black. And the reason we're using these primary colors only is so that we have some uniformity between the CAD drawings that I provide to you in PDF, as well as the actual lesson that you're viewing on your screen, reflecting on what you see on your screen. So for the triangle layer, we're going to pick blue for no other reason other than I'm selecting blue. It's color index number 5. So I'm going to select OK, and you'll see that that chip has now turned to blue. We're going to make 2 more layers. Now, as I click on the new layer icon, what actually happens is the new layer takes on the property of the previous layer. That's why it's blue already. So this one I'm going to type in the word circle. And the circle layer, let's make that one green. So I clicked on the color chip. I'm going to select the green on the color palette. It's index color number 3. Select OK. And then I'm going to create a third layer. The third layer here, I'm going to type in square. And I'm going to change that color to magenta, which is that pinkish hue or fuchsia colored hue. All of them are continuous, and all of them have the same line weight transparency and so on. You'll notice there's a check mark by layer 0. Now layer 0 is very interesting. We typically never draw on layer 0. Layer 0 is a control layer, which simply means that every single CAD file that's out there has layer 0. Everything else I can make up, I can put in. But by having that layer, whenever I'm importing another drawing and I want to control where the elements of that drawing are going to go in reference to the layers, I basically take the other drawing and turn all the elements in layer 0 and then import it into here. And from here, I then switch its layer property. We'll get a chance to do that later on. So everything's good here. I can select any of these layers and change the one I'm going to draw in, but for now just leave it as is and click on the X. So what has changed in our drawing? In the layer menu, if we now go to the top, there's a little arrow that points to the right beside layer 0. If I click on that, I now see the layers that I've created, and this allows me for easy control of which layer I'm going to be working in. Now the basics with this is that the layers are affecting whatever you draw new. So anything that's in this menu, the draw menu, if I select a layer and use any of the elements that are in here, it will draw it based on the properties of it. The layer that you're currently in does not affect the modify menu, and that will make more sense as we work with this. Okay, so let's start. I'm going to click on the circle layer, which is green. You'll notice it now is active in this layer menu at the top, which simply means that it is the current layer. So I mentioned this earlier. Layers are like drawing on sheets of glass, and right now the top sheet is the green layer. So as I draw, I'm only drawing on that one sheet. So if I draw lines, those lines will appear now in green. If I draw circles, those circles will appear in green. If I draw rectangles, it'll appear in green. Now notice, even though I've called this the circle layer, the language that I'm using to describe the layer does not affect what we can draw, but the layer property affects everything that's on my screen. Okay, let's draw a couple of circles here, and as we do that, I'm going to go through the circle menu. I'm going to erase this, and I'm going to click on the erase tool and simply create my window and close everything and press enter. You can see we're rapidly going through previous lessons. The assumption is, again, you've practiced them and you're familiar with what it is that we're doing. If I'm going too fast here, you may want to review some of those lessons. Typically, if you can do a lesson every third day and keep that pace, then your retention level is much higher. If you're only doing one lesson once a week, you may want to review the lesson prior to the new lesson you're going to learn because you don't retain as much. Okay, circle command. Remember our screen is set to inches. It's 12 along the bottom, 9 along the sides. Here's our circle command. Now, there's an arrow that points down. Click on it. These are all the different circle functions that we can use to draw. So I've got center radius, diameter, 2.3 point, tangent, tangent radius, and tangent, tangent, tangent. I will describe those as we move forward. So center radius, when I click on that, you're going to notice that the command prompt below also has identified that we're in the circle command. It's asking us to specify the center point. It also has a couple of different functions that are available. So we picked the one that says center radius. So if I click anywhere on my screen and I type in 1 and enter, what does the 1 represent? Remember, we're in architectural units, so when we don't use a defining suffix like inches or feet, it always defaults to inches, which means typing in nothing but 1 means 1 inch. So if it's a 1 inch radius, the circle itself is 2 inches wide. If I go back into that menu, select center diameter, this time I'm going to pick anywhere else on the screen, and I will type in 1 again, and you'll notice that the diameter here, or the circle, is half the size of the other one. That's because this is a 1 inch diameter, or the distance right across the circle, whereas this one is 1 inch from the center to the outer edge. And then we have the next one on here, which is 2 point. 2 point's interesting because we need to have something to reference in order to draw this. And it gives us an opportunity to start looking at some of the other snap settings. So if I click on 2 point, you'll notice I can find the center of that circle. There's point 1. And as I draw my line, I can find the center of that circle. There's 2. So how did it know to find those centers? Remember last day when we were down in the snap menu, there's an arrow to the right of that. If we select it, and that was one of the functions that were already set. Remember, snap looks for the geometry of an object based on certain definitional points. Every circle has a center. A square doesn't have a center. So when we're dealing with squares, we have to use one of the other functions that are here to find the middle of that particular object. But for circles, we can find centers. But notice how a center doesn't have an endpoint or an intersection. Well, now that these circles have crossed, they do have intersections, and we can use those particular points. So we've looked at 2 point, center diameter, center radius. Let's look at 3 point. And again, it's kind of giving you an indication of what it does. When you select 3 point, you can select any sort of points in space, and it tries to fill an arc within those points. So I'm going to pick just arbitrarily here. There's an intersection. Now before, when we were using this tool on some of the straight lines, it made a square to find the endpoints. This time it's finding the intersection of that. So I'm going to click on that intersection point. There's point 1. I'm going to click on this intersection, which is on the other part of the circle. Now if I click on any other intersection here, it's going to make the exact same circle I made before. So you can see what's happening as I stretch the mouse. It's looking for that third point to make an arc that fulfills the requirement of all 3 points that I'm defining on the same arc. So I'll just pick a point anywhere. And there we have it. So all of these were drawn in the circle layer. Let's switch. Let's go into the square layer. And even though I say it's square, we're going to create any sort of straight edge shape, whether it's a square or rhombus. Let's go into this tool. This is a unique tool. It's called rectangle. There are other options below that. We can do polygons, multi-sided objects, but we're just going to click on the rectangle tool. And I'm going to simply draw 2 points. If I want to actually put in an accurate size, I can use one of the other coordinates that we had talked about before. So I'm going to click on the rectangle tool, click anywhere on your screen, and type in 1, 1 and press enter. And we're using our relative coordinates to define the second point relative to the first that we picked. What's important about this is that I have to have a definitional point for the first one in order to then draw the second part of this rectangle. Let me show you what I mean. Let's say I want to draw another square on top of this. I'm going to use the same tool. And if I find this intersection, well, actually I'm finding an endpoint. Remember, when lines are drawn continuous, it tends to select endpoints, even though it is an intersection by definition. Endpoint meets its criteria for selection. So I'm going to click on that endpoint. And now I can also do another one, a 1, 1 square. And one fits on top of the other. And by using these tools and typing the values, we're maximizing to 16 decimal places. And that's what we want to do throughout the project, because each error that you make that's slight will build as you work through more and more of the drawing. So we want to be as precise as possible. So now we're going to move on to the next layer in our exercise here, and that is the triangle layer. I'm going to click on that one to make it active. And now I'm simply going to use the line tool, draw some lines, And I'm making three-sided objects only because it references the layers, but it's not important that we draw triangles in this particular layer. Again, we're just developing visual cues as to the different items that we're drawing based on the layers that they're in. So I've got my circles in my circle layer, my triangles in my triangular layer, and my rectangles and squares in my square layer. So you can see how very closely this particular panel is directly related, or a direct response to what we have in my layers menu. So what else can we do with layers? Let's turn some off. So I'm going to turn off the square layer and they disappear. Let's bring them back. Just press Control Z and that will bring back that particular layer. I have to click on the screen first in order to exit the layer menu. So if I'm in the triangle layer, I can still erase the rectangle layer. So I'm using my crossing and my individual selection. And I press Enter, and they're actually gone. So you can see the difference between turning a layer off, it's this one, and actually erasing a layer. We can, in fact, in order to avoid something being erased, so I just press Control Z to bring this back on my screen. I can lock that layer. See, there's my little padlock. Now watch what happens when I try to erase. So I'm going to click on the Erase tool. And as I go over top of the object, you get a little padlock, which simply says I can't erase that. If I create a window, it'll pick all the other elements. It'll look like it's picking the rectangle and the square, but it actually leaves them alone. So after I've selected my window, it ghosted out the triangle and the circle, but not the actual square or the rectangle because it is locked. So I simply pressed Escape. That brought me back. So you can see that these functions in the Modify menu, and we haven't learned a lot about them, but these functions in the Modify layer have no effect on the actual objects that are on the screen in relationship to what layer is current. Copy is always one of those that one would think that it is affected by the layer, but that's why it's in the Modify menu. So when I copy an object, it takes on the properties of that object regardless of what layer I'm in. So just for example, and we'll look at copy a bit later on, but if I am currently in the triangle layer and I click on copy and I click on the circle and I move that circle to another location or copy it to another location, you'll notice that it's copying green circles even though I'm in a blue layer. That's because it's a modify function. Remember, it doesn't get affected by the layer that's current. Okay, enough of this. We don't need to save this file. This is simply an exercise. Let's shut this down. We just use the AutoCAD template, which is drawing number 1 listed on our screen. If I click on the X, I don't want to save this. It'll ask me if I want to save the drawing. No. Alright, so let's start working on our actual capstone project. The first thing we're going to do is set up our file parameters. I'm going to select File New. We're going to use the exact same menu that we have over and over again, and you can see this repetition really comes in handy understanding where everything is. A CAD DWT file, select Open. First thing we need to do, set up our units, so we'll type in units. And here they're architectural. Leave it at a 1/16 of an inch, that's fine for now. And now we're going to set up our limits, LIMITS. The bottom left-hand corner is always 0, 0. Now the upper right-hand corner for this project will be 20 feet, 20 feet. So where it says 0, 0, just press Enter. And now we're going to type in 20 and the foot mark, which is right beside the Enter key, then comma, 20 feet. Now make sure it says 20 feet and not inches, because otherwise your screen will look dramatically different. Select Enter, and I will say that down at the bottom once again that the upper right corner, instead of being 1 foot by 9 inches, is now 20 feet by 20 feet. Let's set up our display grid. So I'm going to go down into our drawing aids and click on the arrow beside the grid and change the snap function settings. Now 20 feet a grid spacing of a ½ an inch is really small. So what may be a bit more reasonable in the beginning here is let's do something at about a 6-inch interval. Remove the adaptive and the display grid. Select OK. And let's zoom all. Z enter, A enter. And there is our drafting area, 20 feet by 20 feet. Remember, in CAD, we draw full scale. We will plot to a scale so it fits on a piece of paper that may be 8.5 by 11, 11 by 17, and so on. But we always draw full size. We're going to draw the same item that we drew last time. But before we draw this time, we're going to set up our layers property. Refer to the PDF file that came along with this particular lesson. And on that page, you'll see the different layers we need by their name and their color. So let's go into the layer property menu at the top of our screen. And rare the operation, we click on the new layer icon, the one that has that little orange star on it. The first layer we're going to type in is CAP, C-A-P. And its color is blue. And blue is index color number 5. And then we're going to create the next layer. So I'm going to click on the new layer icon again. And this is the column. And its layer is green. And the next layer, concrete foundation, or C-O-N-C, F-O-U-N-D. And its layer is magenta. The next layer is footing. And its layer is also magenta. Now notice again, when we create the new layer right after an existing layer, it takes on that property. So the magenta color is already there. We don't have to do anything. So let's click on the new layer icon. And there's the rebar. And it will be red. Now here's something new. The rebar layer is actually hidden. That will be in the next lesson when we talk about adjusting line types. All the rest are, by default, they're continuous. So we're good there. We're going to draw the column first, which is green. Now I can actually set this layer to be current right now. I just click on the word column, and there's that green check mark series of icons that are at the top of this menu. So when I close the layer properties menu, the green column layer is already selected. Now this drawing area is approximately twice as large as what we see for our drawing components. So we're going to click on the line tool here, and we're going to draw 4 lines that represent the column. I'm going to pick any space on the left side of the screen, and then I'll draw in a clockwise direction. So I'm going to type in 0, 4 feet. And I'll type in that column width is 11 inches, so 11, 0, and then 4 feet down, 0, minus 4 feet. And then since I've done this continuously, I'll type in C and enter. Now here's where we learn some of the new tricks that we discovered today by using the rectangle tool that's up here. If I clicked on a single point anywhere on my screen, I can actually type in that second coordinate. But what is that second coordinate? The column is 11 inches wide, so it's 11, comma, and how tall is it? 4 feet. 4 feet, and press enter. And there's the exact same column. But this time, instead of drawing 4 lines like we did last day, we simply use the rectangle tool. And these are the techniques that we're going to learn along the way that will make us far more efficient. Now I'm going to draw the cap on here. So what I'm going to do is simply zoom in this particular area. I can use the zoom window, or I can simply move my mouse to approximately where the cap is, and then roll the wheel that's on my mouse that allows me to zoom in a dynamic fashion on this space. Now the reason I moved my mouse near the cap because that will allow me to zoom in that area. So now I'm going to draw the cap. Switch layers. There's cap. So I'm going to click on the line tool, And I'm going to find that intersection or endpoint and found it. Just click on that. Now the drawing itself is giving you some definitional distances. There's two sections to the cap vertically, which are 2 inches each. Horizontally, it's 1 foot 1. And to the right at the top of the cap, you'll notice that it's a 1 inch overhang, 11 inches over top of the column, and then 1 inch overhang again. So let's draw that. We're going to go clockwise once again. So the first coordinates we're going to go with are -1, 0. And now it's going to go 2 inches straight up. So that's 0, 2. Now, we have an angular line here. And there's a couple of different ways that we can draw this. For today, we're simply going to do some quick math. Now, I really try not to use math at all. I don't like to use math. I try to use the geometry to figure this thing out much more rapidly and accurately, because I can always make a mistake in math. But for today, we're just going to use math. That top is 13 inches, 1 foot 1. Divide that in half and you get 6.5 inches. So here we're going to type in 6.5, 2. That is half the width and the height. Now we're going to go down in the other direction, which is 6.5, -2. And then we're going to go straight down 2. So 2, -2. Now in the drawing, the blue line goes right across. So let's just go right to the opposite end. Press enter. And now we can draw the line that represents the edge of the cap. And I'm just going to click on that intersection. Now I just simply pressed enter again on my keyboard to relaunch the line command, because that was the last command I was in. Move to the next location. Press enter. Let's do a zoom all. And there's our drawing. Let's save this file to access it at a later date. File, save as. And we're simply going to call this L1. So I'm going to click on desktop. I'm going to go into my folder. This is lesson 3. And I'm going to call this L1. And then select save. So we're done for the day. I'm just going to close down the file. Then I'm going to close down the program. Well, thanks for joining us today. I look forward to seeing you on the next lesson.